עץ חיים היא למחזיקים בה ותומכיה מאושר תרחיה דרכי נועם וכל נתיבותיה שלום.
Hello. This week's Torah portion, Vayeshev, opens up in the 37th chapter of the book of Genesis. In this Sedra, we read that Jacob is now settled in the land of Canaan. Now, if you've been following along in the Torah up until this point, you know that Jacob's life has been very eventful. As a matter of fact, it's been somewhat tumultuous. He had a very troubled relationship with his twin brother Esau, and because of that relationship, Jacob lived outside of the land where he was born for 20 years. For 20 years, he lived in an area called Haran on the other side of the Jordan River. Last week, we see that Jacob reconciled with his brother. It was a very frightening encounter, but the brothers finally embraced, they cried, and they decided to live in peace. Maybe not side by side, but they decided that they would have a peaceful relationship at least. So the opening words of this week's Torah portion, Vayeshev Yaakov Be'eretz Megorei Aviv Be'eretz Canaan, and Jacob settled in the land of his father's sojourn, the land of Canaan, has a very deep meaning. On one level, on a simple level, it means that he had sunk roots into the land of Canaan. He built there. He was making his living off of that land, and he was settled there in a physical sense. The medieval commentator Rashi tells us that we should understand the word Vayeshev on a somewhat deeper level. He tells us that Jacob had become complacent, that the word Vayeshev means that his mind had become settled. If we try and figure out what Jacob was thinking at that stage in his life, we might come up with the conclusion that Jacob said to himself, after all that I have been through, now my life is going to be simple. We're going to be prosperous here in the land of Canaan, or my relationship with my family is going to be peaceful and uneventful. My relationship with the neighboring peoples is going to be peaceful, and we will never want for anything. Well, as this Torah portion unfolds, we see that none of this came to pass. There was much tumult in Jacob's family. There are problems with the surrounding peoples, and Jacob finds himself once more out of the land of Canaan. Because of a famine, he and his family have to migrate to Egypt. This Torah portion seems to be telling us never to be complacent in life. Never believe for a moment, no matter what stage you happen to be in your life, that you will be exempt from life's challenges and life's problems. Complacency is a terrible thing, and we're warned not to be complacent. This Torah portion is read during this weekend that we call the Thanksgiving weekend. Of course, we celebrate Thanksgiving on Thursday, and we read this portion on Saturday. It seems to me that America has become complacent, and on Thanksgiving we should never be complacent about the problems confronting our society. One of the problems that has always confronted American society is the problem of the hungry. There have been many eras in American history when Americans have not been able to assume that they had enough food to eat. This was certainly the case of the very early pioneers in America with the Pilgrims. It was the case during the 1930s, during the Great Depression, when my parents were young. Do you know that in the 1930s, about 25% of Americans were hungry? And not only were there hungry Americans, there were people who actually were dying of starvation. In one year in the 1930s, almost 50 people died of malnutrition in the city of New York. Well, here it is, 2010. And with all of the progress that we've made as a society, we might believe that there aren't hungry people in our communities. This simply is not true. A recent survey conducted by the Gallup Association tells us that during the last 12 months, almost 18% of Americans went hungry at some time during this last year. That's almost 1 out of 5 Americans. And those of us who don't have to worry about putting food on our tables, we may have grown complacent. And we worry that maybe we're not quite as prosperous as we were last year or the year before. But we have an abundance of food. And so it's very important, I believe, on Thanksgiving, to give to the hungry, to be involved in our local food banks and those organizations, to support those local organizations that feed the hungry. This is the message of Thanksgiving. And the message of Vayeshev is that we may not be complacent about the hungry in our midst. Shabbat Shalom.